So good afternoon and welcome to this webinar with Finn in association with e-Memoir, and this afternoon we're joined by Kerry Boffey and Beej Kaczmarczyk. And in just a short moment I'll hand over to Beej for some of the introductions as well, and we'll explain a little bit more about who and what Finn is and does along with Kerry. So session is expected to run for around about 45 minutes to an hour, depending on the type and volume of questions that might come from yourselves. As ever, we're recording these sessions and you'll all receive a copy of the video recording and slides. And we like to keep our sections as interactive as possible. So if you have any questions or thoughts, feel free to use the question or chat facility at any point throughout the duration of the webinar. And post-webinar, again, upon reflection and perhaps a review of the video recording, if you have any questions for Beej or for Kerry and the team, obviously all the contact details will be up there, and I'd encourage you to get in contact. We always like to keep the dialogue going, and we are always happy to help. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Beej and Kerry. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Manik. So Manik, if you just press the record.
No, we're recording. We're live.
Brilliant. Thank you very much then. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this afternoon's webinar. It's Finn in association with e-Memoir. I'll introduce Kerry in a minute. We'll just say a few words about herself, but I'll be chairing and dealing with the questions or comments as they go along to allow Kerry to focus on her presentation and deal with follow-up questions as well. As Marek says, if you're listening to the recording rather than listening live to us, then obviously any questions or any things that you need to be answered that haven't been covered in the course of today, please use the contact details. You'll be able to get in touch with Kerry or ourselves at the very end, and the slides will obviously have that contact information. So powering up and preparing yourself for inspection, and a three-stage approach is what Kerry is going to be sharing with you today, as well as explaining what Finn is and what Finn does. As I said, I'll be quite happy to, at certain points, interject with questions or comments, as well as obviously act as a moderator for any of the questions or comments that you want to pose. So without further ado, let me introduce Kerry, who will say a few words about herself. Kerry.
Hello everybody, thank you for coming out on this afternoon, or for those of you who are listening to the recording. My name's Kerry Boffey. I've run the Adult Learning Improvement Network for a number of years, and that was the more traditional preparation for inspection and supporting providers. And we recognised the need to have a slightly different approach. So about 2 years ago, I founded the Fellowship of Inspection Nominees, which is a membership organisation. We still have Alan, but this is a whole new fresh approach where we provide ongoing support for people, because inspection preparation isn't something you do last minute. It's a culture of all year round, and we wanted to make sure the nominee felt supported and part of an organisation that was always thinking about inspection, always one step ahead, and that's where Finn came from. So, are you happy for me to go on, Beej, with the presentation from there? I'm hoping
absolutely
everyone can see my screen of Power Up. So, the session outcomes, hopefully, we're going to talk about today is we're going to talk about some of the main points and questions around inspection at this moment in time. And it is really important that we remember that at this moment in time, towards the end of September, or if you're looking at this later, you need to bear in mind that some of the things are fluid at the moment and things are subject to change. So that is sort of a health warning about whenever you listen to this recording. We're going to talk about the Register of Inspection Nominees. So we've created something in addition to the membership, which is about a national register as well. And I'm going to encourage everybody to sign up to the register, because that's absolutely free of charge. And anybody on the register will be invited to a session we are planning at the moment with Paul Cocker around the interim visits. I hope to provide a structure today that everyone can adapt, and that's about Power Up, because actually, as we're going to talk about later, there's so many things going on, there's so many things to think about, to do, that inspection's furthest from everybody's mind. And we just wanted to have something practical and a few steps that people can use in relation to Power Up. I also then want to talk about stage 2 and stages 3 over the autumn term, and there's a link there to an article that I wrote recently in FE News that you could by all means have a look at about powering up and where it comes from, and also to talk about Fin membership and the resources that are in relation to that. So that's the outcomes from today. So just very quickly, who and what is Fin? I'm not going to go through this in the details. I'm going to leave this on the slides for you to read, hopefully, in your own time. There's two things. So we've got the Fellowship of Inspection Nominees, which is the membership organisation that we really hope you'll consider joining. And then there's also the Register of Inspection Nominees, which is free to join, and we would hope everyone will enrol. So I'm going to just leave that slide for you to come back to at some point. So where are we now? Well, there's a lot of discussion, a lot of debate. I think the biggest one is, when will Ofsted start graded inspections again? Now, we're going to come on to this in a moment, a bit later on in the presentation. However, at this moment in time, Ofsted have said they're going to come in back in January, at some point in January. However, we are mindful that things are subject to change. Other questions include, what exactly the monitoring visits, who will they select, how will they inspect, what will the emphasis be, and how will I decide what to focus on first. So, and we're not going to spend time crystal ball gazing, and that's what I want to do now. It's about thinking about, there's all these things going on, but let's focus on what we can do. Let's control what we have control of, rather than things that we don't. Earlier this year, Paul Joyce came out very boldly, and I think it was a fantastic thing they did. And they said, just do the right thing. Don't worry about Ofsted at the moment, just do the right thing. Now, working with providers around the country, we have recognised that in doing the right thing, they seem to fit into, the main actions seem to fit into 4 clear areas. Fitted into work around supporting the learners, work around supporting the staff and colleagues, some fantastic work with continuing their relationships with employers, and also a necessary focus on maintaining that business. So that's just how, when we come to look at what people had done with the right thing, that's the 4 areas they came into. So what's first on the agenda? Well, first on the agenda are these monitoring visits. And what we've been told at the moment is that those ungraded interim visits are going to take place from sometime during October through to December. However, you know, they may well go on into January if inspections are postponed further. This is a provisional date for your diary at the moment. Paul has, this is Paul Cocker, who's the head of National Apprenticeships, has offered to do a session for us. And as I've explained, if you are on the register of nominees, you will get invited to join myself, Kerry Boffey, in conversation with Paul to talk about these interim visits. So there's no strings attached. That is purely a genuine offer. So one of the things that we have recognised is that every provider is different, and there are so many questions going on. So, for example, and these might be some of the questions that are floating around. How has your intent changed? What are the needs of your learners now? What have your employers changed? How has it gone? How will your intent look in the future? What about your implementation? How are you delivering? How did it change your safeguarding? What challenges did you face? What actions have you taken regarding the furloughed staff? How are you bringing them back into the business? How many have you lost? How have you managed their caseloads going from a certain amount, you know, to going into the future? How will you manage those caseloads for the future? What impact did your senior managers and leaders have in driving your provision during COVID? How did that change? How did that board influence your provision? What about retention achievements? How were those affected? You know, what did it do? Did you have a different strategy? What did you do to retain your learners? What steps did you take? How did you look after the health of your learners? Did your priorities change? And does your self-assessment have any relation this year to what you've done previously? Is it a completely new self-assessment? Have you looked at your provision through new eyes? So what I wanted to give you a flavour of is just, you know, some of the many questions that are floating around. And the responses have been all sorts. So here's just a flavour of some of the things that some of the providers have been saying to us. And there isn't one answer, because or questions we've been asked. So everybody has a different experience. Some people can't get over how amazing their employers have been. Other people are just saying, look, we're on business, we're dealing with one day at a time. Some people have said it's a great opportunity to do something different. And some people have just said, you know, this is just a nightmare, it's really challenging. So there's no right or wrong answers. Beach, perhaps you've had different experiences. What from your experience, what have your providers been saying?
Yeah, well, I mean, certainly from looking at, because I'm representing, you know, I can represent a college. I'm also director of 2 private training companies, and right across the piece from 16 to 19 study programs to our apprenticeships and loan funded provision as well as adults. I think that range of responses, certainly, you know, we would echo them. Additional ones have been particularly concerns, as you said, about safeguarding of our 16 to 19 learners, issues about adults that have not been able to access remote learning because they're digitally poor. You know, they don't have access to, there might be one iPad between 5 people in the house and things like that, to those things where, you know, could you please continue to use blended learning because it suits my learning style. So I think we've had a whole lot of responses that are very, you know, some very positive, some very negative. There's a lot of catch-up issues, particularly with some of our learners who are doing English and maths, who are very concerned about the fact that they would be going into their programs and not having got as much face-to-face delivery. And I think one of the questions that one of our respondents, one of our participants has asked is, you know, when you think about it, will a lot of this information be available remotely? How much can they gather in one of these interim? How long will the interim visit be, Kerry?
We haven't been given any specific details of exactly how many inspectors for how many days, and I think at the moment they're working that out currently. And as soon as we have that information, we're more than happy to share that with you. And I'm hoping that Paul might shed a little bit more light on it when he does that session with us.
And I think the other thing is that some people have commented it's got to be proportional, because for many of us, the impact will have been different depending on what kind of learners we've had, what kind of facilities we've got. And some learners will have already returned. We know of some providers that haven't yet, they haven't reintroduced face-to-face delivery yet. They're waiting for maybe to the end of the month or beginning of next month, because they've got issues about preparation, and they've had maybe they're in a hot spot where there's been some increase in infection rates. So it's a very mixed picture, isn't it, Kerry? And I think that's why if we're going to have these interim arrangements up until the end of December or maybe beyond, is that, you know, it's going to be a very mixed response from a different range of providers, from the small training providers to the big training providers, from colleges that are general colleges and colleges maybe which are a sixth form college. So very different type of, you know, of impacts, and it's all very difficult when you're, you know, still managing a certain degree of uncertainty.
Absolutely, and I don't want us to get confused at the moment. This session isn't going to be about those interim visits because they're not graded.
No.
For me, they are more about Ofsted really kind of feeling their feet of what is going on out there, and they're designed to be supportive visits. And I know there's been a lot of movement on Twitter today from Ofsted saying, you know, that they've started with the schools ones and the response has been very positive. They're not designed to inspect you. They are designed to be supporting visits.
Yeah.
Find out what the sector's doing. So this is not a time to be nervous or apprehensive about those visits. They're much more of an open dialogue and more of an Ofsted sort of feeling their feet of what's going on out there. So I don't think this is the time to worry about those. And Powering Up isn't looking at those visits. That's what we're going to be doing with Paul Cocker next week.
Well, that's right, yeah. And I think Carolyn, very kindly, thanks very much for that, Carolyn. She sent us information on the duration and size of the teams, and that will be, that's just for the interim phase. So we'll send that out to people at the end of the presentation. But as Kerry says, our focus is not on that, but on obviously powering up for the graded inspections when they start again. Got another comment from someone who says that they understand that the graded inspections might actually be delayed well beyond Easter of next year, possibly into the beginning of the next academic year. Well, that'd be 2021-22, wouldn't it, Kerry?
Absolutely, and that's why at the moment Ofsted haven't updated that, so we're only able to share with you what they're saying at the moment. At the moment it's still January. However, I think as things change, it's very likely that these may well go on. These interim visits may well likely go on further. I mean, there are some visits going on, some inspections going on if there's a safeguarding issue or a real concern. So Ofsted have kept that that provision that they can make that judgment call and say, we're going to come and do that. But that's only under risk assessment under extreme circumstances.
Yeah. So how can you sort of make sense of this future?
Okay.
Can we clear the fog a wee bit?
Absolutely. Beautifully put. So the next thing we're going to do is look at, so what really can you do? Now, how do we clear the fog? And actually, powering up doesn't necessarily hinder the interim inspections at all, the interim visit. So it's not that it doesn't take them away from them, but it's that long-term looking. So the first thing I'd like everybody to do is kind of take a step back and say, let's focus on what we do know and let's prioritize. So powering up at the moment, and this may well change, is about the now, the here and now. It's looking into the autumn term, more into the October, November, and it may well look into December and on into January. Now, these timelines can change, and also the powering up system, it really is quite simple. It's an overview, is very simple and can be rerun. So it's not a case of it's a one-off, one and only, done that, move on. It's a case of actually you can start the cycle again. So it really is quite a useful process to follow. So it's autumn term, 3 critical stages. And as I've said, at the moment, inspections are going on from January, but that could change. So what are the 3 stages of powering up, and what on earth do I mean by them? I think critically, it's about, the first step is about capturing. There has been undoubtedly some fantastic good practice that has gone on across the sector, and I'll come on to the stage 1 in more detail in a moment. But it's too easy to forget, and I really, really urge every training provider in every single environment they're in to take a moment to just think, what have we done well? How are we going to capture that positive actions, those strengths, the stories, the anecdotes? How are we going to capture it? Capture it now, because I guarantee that in January, February, whenever they inspect, especially if it's not until, you know, much later on in the year, you will have forgotten, you'll have lost the detail, you won't have it. So it's really important that you take the time to capture. Stage 2 is about evaluating. It's about quality assuring every element of what you do. Don't wait for Ofsted to come and tell you and then say, yeah, we knew that wasn't very good. They're not going to be patient when they come back. When they do come back, they're going to expect you to have dealt with everything and move things forward. And then your final stage, your stage 3, is about really planning those last minute things. Who's doing what? What about the communication tree? Who's got the responsibility? And checking how learners will articulate that. So there's kind of those 3 very specific stages, and I'll go into them in more detail. And then, of course, you are then inspection ready, and those can be done over and over again. So stage 1, in a bit more detail. So these were animated before everything they'd come in, but I think sometimes people think those are a bit annoying, so I've done it all on one, but I'm going to talk you through each one. There have been some great heartwarming stories about staff and learners going the extra mile, about employers. Tales of collaboration, partnership, anecdotes, things that you would never have dreamed of happening before COVID came along. What about the barriers that some of your learners have overcome? Let's record them now, capture them now. And anyone who's worked with me before will have heard me use the phrase little gems. And the nominee can become the central point for those little gems. Make sure the rest of the business know that you are really interested in these good news stories. Celebrate it, send out newsletters, make sure the staff know, learners know, employers know that you are really interested to hear about those positive experiences. And I think this is really an interesting one. Seek out the modest stuff. There will be so many people in your team that you know full well will just do the job. They'll go the extra mile, but they would never tell you about it. They would not think 1 minute to say, oh, look what I've done. Think about who they are. Go out and reach out to them. Go and find out what they've been doing, and you will have some fantastic things to look at with them. Document it and categorize it, because actually, if you take these little gems and you record them and you look at how you're going to utilize them, they can become really good qualitative and quantitative data. So you turn them into that data, that information. Now, Fin members will know that there's lots of Fin resources that support this. So there's a form you can fill in that captures it, that then references EIF. There's flowcharts you can follow. And there's a process that says, is this a strength? Let's be systematic about it. Was this particular gem or this good practice? Was it just because we'd got some really good practice and COVID provided an environment that wasn't normally there? But actually, on reflection, it's really good and we could turn it into a process for good practice in the future. Or was it confirmation that a process you put in place, maybe some time ago, works really, really well, and therefore it adds weight to that strength and evidence that that strength and that process really works. So it's about being systematic. This isn't a fluffy stage at all. Anyone who's switched off and thinks, oh, it's all fluffy. It is not fluffy. There's nothing fluffy about your little gems. I'm talking about hard, concrete evidence that really builds that focus that says, do you know what? We've done a really good job during COVID. So this stage one is really, really important. Reference it to the EIF so that when graded inspections come along, you've got the evidence of where that fits, and it might be about your intent, it might be about your implementation, it might be about quality, it might be about leadership management. It doesn't matter where it fits in, but again, it's about you as the nominee or as the leader and manager understanding where the evidence is for your strengths. And it's really important to evidence it. It is really important to capture it so that you know what it was, how it happened, when it happened, and how it could be substantiated. So record it. And learners often really like doing things on their video. Get them to capture a 30-second video where they talk about their own experiences. That is fantastic evidence further down the field in 3 months, 6 months, 8 months, or whatever. So that stage one is really important, and it's not a fluffy stage. It's a really hardcore based evidence process. Beej, any comments?
There's a couple of questions I'll pose, but a comment here is that I think it's very important to reflect that we would normally be collecting this information in preparation for a graded inspection. But I think with COVID, there's been a bit more, if anything, emphasis on getting as much, not just the hard data, you know, what's happened to our attendance patterns, 16 to 19 adults, apprentices, retention. We can collect all that. But then, you know, even if you've had a dip in attendance, for example, 16 to 19, who was it? Why? How did you try and support them? What remedial action did you take? What support did you offer? All of these little gems, even in a bad situation, can say, well, look, we had the clear intent and the implementation to make things which could have been a lot worse, because my argument is that if you've managed to get 95% attendance on a study program to either face-to-face or online is really marvelous stuff. Yeah, but we used to get 98% attendance, yeah. But if you hadn't done things, it could have been in the low 80s, couldn't it? But I think it's having that anecdotal bit to support any data, which says, what were students' feelings about your support? How did they feel when they felt isolated, when, for example, if they were digitally poor, you know, what did you do as a provider to support them in terms of maybe lending them equipment or giving them, you know, help with accessing Moodle or whatever virtual learning environment you offered? So I think it's not just got to be the hard data, as you said, the information on those things, you know, how many employer contacts did you have, etc., which you still have to generate, even if you're running work placements, even if the placements weren't there, when you're still engaging with the employers, but also that qualitative stuff about students and learners and employers about how they felt. And as one of you added, you know, for example, did you have any safeguarding issues? How did you deal with them? Did any of you offer additional safeguarding, for example, a 24-hour helpline? And you might have set it up before, but actually it came in really handy during lockdown. So I think, you know, you're right, Kerry. There's quite a lot of things there that you've got to collect, and it's not all fluffy. It can be very hard, but the qualitative and anecdotal stuff is often very good. And if you collect that through, you know, anecdotal evidence, through videos, through statements, through witness testimony, whatever, or just simply from what, you know, your questionnaires might say, you know, did you issue regular checks on how people felt about the support you're providing during COVID? So I think, and this is something I think that will carry on even without a lockdown in the recovery stage, is just as important. How do learners feel just now as they've been reintroduced into face-to-face work maybe within their own bubbles, etc., or those poor old apprentices that have had to wait longer to get their endpoint assessment. So I think there's a lot of things there that you've covered in that first stage, Kerry. Thank you.
No, and I would say that those are really good points. Thank you, Beach. But I would also say that stage one is about avoiding the scramble, because as and when you do get that inspection, then people will go into a scramble mode, a panic mode of, well, where's the evidence of that? What did we do? Oh, they want to know what we did during this, during that. If you collect it now, when you haven't got the scramble, when it's fresh in people's mind, and catalogue it and treat it with the respect that those good practice should be kept with, and record them, then you're in a much stronger position. And you can put it to bed. You can think about it. You've done it. You've captured it. You can put it to bed and then move on to the next areas.
And there's a good point made by one person. He says, since we've been recording almost all of our team meetings and quality meetings on Zoom or Teams, we've actually got a record because we've recorded them.
Brilliant. Yeah,
so
absolutely. Really good example. Really
there's your sort of cumulative source of evidence. Thank you. Thanks for those comments.
So thank you very much. So that's your stage one. So what happens in stage two? Well, stage two, and if ever you've heard of the expression that a tiger without teeth is just a big fluffy pussycat. And stage two is about, as the nominee or whoever you are in that senior leadership role, is about you evaluating that provision yourself. Really put yourself through the paces of putting your quality under the microscope. Don't let Ofsted do it for you. Do it before they get there. Do it long before they get there. Consider that learner's journey from the very beginning right the way through the process. What is the quality of all those interventions? Now that a lot of delivery's gone online, you will have had to look at the way you observe, the way that you measure your quality. It will have changed because your delivery model has changed. Make sure that you're absolutely confident in the quality of what you are delivering, so that you can put the steps in right to improve it. Because at the end of the day, the most important thing is that you are delivering high quality. And as the nominee, you are going into that inspection, whenever it is, defending it with the right evidence, that you've got the evidence, that you have quality assured it, that you have monitored the quality and improved during this time. One of the big ones is about IAG, because if you had information, advice and guidance in January, show me a learner or an employer, or in fact anybody in any career whose IAG hasn't changed 3 or 4 times during this until now. So information, advice and guidance is not something that you just did once. And certainly for youngsters on a 2 or 3 year apprenticeship, or actually any age on a long-term apprenticeship, or somebody on a study program, their ideas, the advice and guidance will have changed because the environment's changed, the employment landscape has changed. How somebody would go for a job, or what they would do, what their career choices might be, has completely changed. So don't forget, your information, advice and guidance needs to be throughout the summer period and moving into autumn as well, not just, well, we did that when they first started the program. So while we don't know for a fact, I'm fairly confident that Ofsted will look at that and say, well, how did your advice and guidance change during that period of time? Take a close look at the retention and the data. I think you've already alluded this to Beej earlier, but it's really important that, and I think actually one of the guests on the session today raised that as a question and said they were looking into it. And it's really important that you capture, about the retention information and what story does it tell, so that you can fully understand what the data is telling you. And you can't just say it's because of COVID, because actually COVID isn't an excuse. It's an environment, and there will be different aspects of COVID that will have impacted, but that's what you need to unpack. You need to have your story ready, that you understand it, so that you can demonstrate what action you took and how you actually minimized any early leavers, or how you worked with the providers to secure employment for people. So there's a lot of things under retention and that progress data that you really need to capture and understand every aspect. And check and challenge every aspect of delivery. Be confident in your ability to articulate your provision and your rationale for the decisions and outcomes. And it's so important that this stage is really critical, regardless of when it is, because it could be in the autumn, or if Ofsted move the goalposts, you may well, that they're scheduling and timetabling, it may well be that your stage 1 takes a little bit longer, but stage 2 is really critical. And one of the things that, and certainly it's on the Fin resources that members can access, and it's about that governance good practice. What were your governors and leaders and board members doing to help you during this period of time to ensure the quality of what you delivered? So that's really important. Other Fin resources that are available are the quality indicators, which is self-evaluation checklists that members can use to look at their provision. But it's not just about external. You may well have your own quality checks, but it's really important that you really understand that stage 2, which is about the quality of what you deliver. Beej, have you got anything you want to add to stage 2?
I think just in addition to the points you've made, I think, again, our observation here as governors and board members has been how important it has been that we have had regular reports, and when we've been meeting for every month on Team or Zoom about what the impacts of all of our actions are. So as you said, although we've had to make quite significant changes to the delivery models, and particularly for study programs and for longer programs, but also, our endpoint assessment arrangements for a lot of our apprentices. I mean, many of them are still waiting for the endpoint assessment because it's been so difficult to find appropriate spaces as well as facilities. Is that we're constantly, as you said, evaluating the impact on the quality bottom line as well as the funding bottom line. And of course, the difficulty we've got to some extent is we don't know what the benchmarks are, because obviously our previous benchmarks were in a different set of, as you said, conditions. Now, what is the benchmark? And that's going to be a difficult thing to measure. Also, the other thing I think that's important, Kerry, that you said is this is so different, learning aim by learning aim. So in some areas, it might be a level 3 diploma where you've had fantastic feedback from the learners and great progression. And, in fact, you're performing just as well as you did before. So the evaluation will show very positive. But in another level 2, you might have had, because of digital poverty or, some issues with functional skills and the background skills they needed to perform, then it's been less so. So I think it's as you said, having a confidence that you've got a real good handle on what the information is telling you in terms of the quality indicators and in terms of, impacts in particular. And we've certainly had a big issue about how well we've supported furloughed staff from some of our employer partners, who there've been a big take up of, for example, level 2 and level 3 diplomas in health and social care, and in the logistics industry for people that are more likely to be made unemployed. So I think certainly in stage 2, the evaluation of how effective has been your support for furloughed workers, and how well are you preparing people who might be, for example, unemployed in future. So again, how well we support the learners who have lost their jobs. We've had apprentices that have lost their jobs at Rolls-Royce. Well, what are we doing to support them, and how effective has that support been, and how are we getting that feedback from the learners as well as the employer? So I think that's, as you said, this is again all an iterative process that we're doing all the way while through.
I think you've raised an interesting point there as well about the digital poverty, and I think where learners, because this is the quality of what you do at this stage 2, is that where you have had some learners that are disadvantaged, what have you done to create that level playing field?
Absolutely.
And have you just looked at what the teacher or trainer has done, or have you looked at what the learner is receiving and how they've received it and where they've received it, and do they have the digital abilities or confidence or access to the resources to be able to receive that learning? So that's a really good point. Thank you.
And I think a good point there, Kerry, is in some cases we've given these learners, we've lent them equipment, but they haven't used it. So even though might think the action's good, but actually the impact is minimal. so because they just haven't had the motivation or whatever. So I think there's got to be the thing's got to be followed right through to what is the impact on learning.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, and then stage 3. So stage 3 is about that final plan. Now it may well be that if the timeline changes, that your time that you take to do these stages may well change. I would say still do stage 3, because actually it's something that you can revisit. So stage 3, even if they don't inspect in January, but if you do stage 3, which is about those specific last minute plans of what will you do at that moment's notice, who does what, allocating that responsibility of who is responsible for each particular area, what presentations might they use, what evidence might they use. This is about the nominee being in control of the whole situation and knowing what will happen. It's about the communication tree that you've written, sharing that across the business, or having it ready to share. And I would never ever suggest that a provider does things just for Ofsted. That's not the way I work. I would never want with the Fellowship. We're not interested in jumping through hoops that we think are just for Ofsted. If you actually look at what Ofsted want, they want quality. They want high quality delivery and high impact. And we would celebrate that and say that's where your focus needs to be. And I would suggest that actually there's a lot more emphasis on how learners articulate their progress and how they articulate, for example, how they would use Prevent, what they've learned in safeguarding and how it's made them feel safer at work or more confident. And I actually think practicing that with learners isn't just about being able to speak to Ofsted. It's actually being able to build the confidence, because sometimes when we think something, it's one thing, but when we articulate it out loud, it increases our learning. It's part of that spiral curriculum of layering the learning. And actually, when they hear themselves say it, or when they have to do a presentation, it's powerful. It's great for Ofsted too, but it's also good for the learner themselves. So get them practicing how they would articulate their progress. What difference has this program made to you? How have you progressed? How do you use Prevent in your workplace? How do you feel safe? Have you implemented safeguarding? And get them to really practice it, but not in a way that benefits Ofsted, but in a way that benefits the learners. And actually, from the point of view of it'll help with your inspection as well, but focus it on the benefits for the learners themselves. And practice interviews with senior managers. Now, this is really, really interesting. So many times I've worked with providers, and there's a naivety about they think what senior leaders will say, and the reality is senior leaders don't necessarily always sing off the same hymn sheet, or they don't understand what matters to Ofsted. I think this is often interesting with employer providers, because sometimes they bring in a senior leader who's from the business who hasn't perhaps fully understood, not always, but just occasionally, the apprenticeship program, for example. And it's really important that as the nominee that you would understand what they might say. And again, there's Fin resources to support all of this, and there's going to be a whole selection of training and webinar facilities that will be discounted for members, but they will be open to non-members as well. Anyone that's on the register can actually opt for those as well, but they're discounted for Fin members, about helping to prepare some of your stuff as well. So kind of that's more of the traditional inspection readiness, but I would suggest that's the final stage, when you've got stage 1 and you've got stage 2 and you're comfortable with that, and then you move on to stage 3. Beej, would you like to add anything to stage 3?
Just a question to you, Kerry. How important do you think it is that we translate everything into the language that the students or the apprentices will understand? Because often if you look at the inspection, the EIF, that's using our language, the language we're familiar with. I think, it's like when you say to learners, do they always understand the nuances of tutorial or careers advice? And if they might say, well, no, we haven't had any sessions on careers. We just had sessions where we identified what we're really good at and the jobs that match it, but we never had any on careers. They think, well, wait a minute, they use a different language. How important do you think it is that we try and get them to understand, to explain things in their terminology?
I think that's a really interesting question. And for me, it's got to be what matters to the learner most, what's the biggest impact on the learner. However, what we can do is we can be the translators. So the providers themselves can help to translate some of that. So I don't think necessarily a learner has to have every word polished beautifully. What they need to do is perhaps have it documented somewhere that this is the resource and this is how we've shared it with our learners. It really matters to me that those learners are safe. And interestingly enough, when you say, for example, in some industries where you've got lots of they may well have previously had Eastern European learners. And I would say, that's interesting. So how do you talk to them about safeguarding? And they say, well, what do you mean? We just talk about safeguarding. I said, well, how do you translate safeguarding into their own language? Because there isn't a direct translation in many of these languages. Now, that's an exercise in itself. If you are trying to get somebody from an Eastern European country, for example, to understand the word safeguarding, or from any nationality really, where English isn't their first language, talk to them about what's the closest translation to safeguarding. And I think some of them it talks about security and safe and all sorts of different things. And that will be part of the conversation that you have. It will make that translation into Ofsted speak a lot easier if they've understood where you're coming from. So it's a really interesting exercise for staff to do if they have people with different languages as their first language, to talk about the word safeguarding, because there isn't a direct translation in many languages.
I think that's a useful point that you've made there. And another point that's supposed to be made is sometimes the learners will say, you know, you might have a particular strength. You said, well, 100% of our study program students have got a week's placement at least. And then when you talk to the learners, they said, yeah, but it wasn't relevant to my study, or it was a waste of time, or I was just cheap labor. I think you should be rehearsing with the learners. If that's the case, then why didn't you sort it out? You know, so if it shouldn't be coming as a surprise at stage 3 or when you're inspected that you actually find that 100% coverage of a work placement, but only had a 60% satisfaction rating. You know, that's something you should have dealt with, well before. You don't really want to find that out just as the week before inspection, do you?
It is, and that's a really interesting one. And funny enough, during this term, one of the webinars we're going to be putting on is one that I call the power of perception. And it's literally all about looking at what is the perception of your learners, not necessarily the reality, not the truth, but what is their perception. And actually, if we can understand what the learner's perception is of their work experience, of the different things they have done, then we can actually then unpack it to think, if that's their perception, why is it that perception? Yeah. And it may well be that the work experience didn't initially appear to be related. However, there are certain aspects which are very transferable. So again, that's about the provider being the translator, so
Absolutely.
that understands about the importance of that work experience and how those skills are translated and translatable. Interesting enough, just one quick anecdote, that some time ago we were looking into work experience in relation to study programs, and we went along to and it was an animal rescue centre, and the provider was particularly proud of the work they did with the animal rescue centre, because they sent their animal care learners to it and said, that they're very well trained. The rescue centre said, we've got some real issues because the youngsters they're sending to us on these study programs, they don't understand about the importance of confidentiality. And my understanding is that they put something on social media and it interrupted a court case with the RSPCA. And so while the organisers thought that what the provider needed one thing, the employer needed one thing, the reality was quite different. So they needed things on confidentiality and the importance of not using social media. So it's up to the provider to make sure that, because that was a good example used about work experience, to do that translation for them of what's the importance of that. But yeah, that's where the participating, how a learner articulates their progress and how they can translate what they've learned into the world of work is really important.
Thank you.
And so finally, you go through those stages and it takes you nearer to that inspection readiness. And it's about keeping that momentum going. You can revisit stage 1, 2 and 3 on a regular basis to go back and say, have we got any more good practice? Let's revisit, let's have it on our quality calendar. We go back to looking at the quality of what we do, and then we come back and revisit our inspection readiness. I mean, I didn't talk about it, but one of the other things we would suggest is that you have a 10 slide maximum PowerPoint that introduces your organisation. If every 3 months you have a quick 5-minute look at that, that is an example of something which is quick communication. It's very bold. It's all about your provision, but it's only 3 months old. And that makes a big difference that you are updating something that's 3 months old rather than something you haven't looked at for several months. So that's the idea of the overview, that you can then adapt it yourself into those 3 stages at any moment of time that suits yourselves. And just that's a quick reminder of some of the Fin resources, a quick plug on that any members would be able to achieve. So generating your own checklist is what I need to do now to power up. How am I going to move my provision forward? And this is about you taking the concept of power up and thinking, okay, let's clear the fog. I can organize 3 stages. Beej, have you got anything you'd like to add?
I think one of the things about Power Up and its application is it can be applied in different contexts. Some of the people that are listening in will be coming from larger organizations that might have a big support infrastructure, might have a quality team. You've also got to think about the smaller independent trainers where the nominee might be the quality manager, the deliverer, and possibly also the owner. So I think it's got to be adaptable, Kerry, to whatever situation you find yourself in as a provider.
Yeah, and that's really critical, and that's why you should be able to do that. It can be made into a big task, or depending on the provision, it can be quite small. It can be quite manageable, and you can allocate certain people or yourself to say, well, I'm going to focus on this for this month and that for that month, and then I'm going to move on to those. You've got a time when never before have Ofsted said we're not going to come in for X number of months minimum. You've never had this time before. Now is the time to power up.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think that's a critical sort of lesson. Can we just say before we move on, are there any other questions about the Power Up tool itself and the process that Kerry has shared? Any further comments or questions before we move into the last little bit? No, can't see any. Okay, that's all right. Back to you, Kerry.
Right, so I think before Beej, you just said it was worth just reminding everybody quick what Fin was. So a quick reminder that we've got the Fellowship of Inspection Nominees, which is a membership, and we do want everyone to register on the register of nominees, which is on the website. There's no charge for registering your nominee, and it just means that they will get an invitation to the session with Paul Cocker when that is finally arranged. So so please, I hope that everyone will do that. I've just got this, which I won't read out to you now. It's the slides, and it just talks about some of the benefits of becoming a member of Fin, and that's our contact details. So just that's just for you for information if you wanted to know more about the benefits of joining Fin. Beej, have you got anything else you'd like to add?
Well, thanks very much. First of all, Kerry, thanks very much for your clear presentation on the Power Up process and tool, and also for, I think, helping people understand the role of Fin and the services it provides. I think one of the things I'd just like to say, again, I've worked with groups of providers. Very often they'll say, well, you know, I am the owner, I am also the main trainer, and I'm also the nominee. So, you know, the more help I can get to power up for inspection, the better, but for the graded inspection. One of the things I think it'd be important, if you obviously want to take up any of the points, any of the issues raised by Kerry, you can contact her directly and just do so. Please do so. But the other thing is, if, for example, you think that there's some benefits in a small group of you coming together and working with Fin, then certainly we would be very happy to facilitate that and offer discounts to people who can come together. So, for example, if you're working in a forum, such as in, say, you know, in any part of the country where you might be representing training providers, which can include obviously your FE college colleagues, then please get in touch with us, and I'm sure that Kerry and her team will negotiate and be able to meet your needs in a more effective way. So don't be put off if you're a smaller organization for taking up the membership. In fact, I think there would be more need for you to take up some of the benefits of the Fellowship of Inspection Nominees. Anything else you want to say, Kerry?
I just think I'm extremely proud to work in the FE sector, and I really have been bowled over by just what amazing work the providers have done during this whole COVID scenario, and just the barriers that they've overcome and the support they've provided their learners has been fantastic. So I think you really deserve a pat on the back, and that's what really drove me to think about this powering up, to say, let's capture all the good stuff that you've done. So so really, it's a huge thank you on behalf of all those learners for the fantastic work that all the providers, all types of providers, have done.
And I would certainly echo what you've just said to all of our colleague providers. And clearly, you know, I'm also reflecting here as a provider how important it is that we are powering up, ready for these the graded inspections. But at the same time, think of it as an iterative process. That's something that we'll be doing on a regular basis, collecting all that evidence of how well we support our learners, not just for inspection. I think it's for our own self-development and our own self-evaluation, as well as to identify where we can still do things better. I think that's what matters most. So, Marek, are there can you see any other questions or comments? We haven't seen any.
No, I believe that's all. That's all I can see.
Yeah,
I think, as Kenneth B says, upon reflection, any questions, please get in touch, as we're always happy to help.
And you can always get in touch with us, particularly those of you listening to the recording. Kerry, thank you very much again for this afternoon, and thank your colleagues at Finn. And we'll certainly pick up some of the issues that have been raised by those comments or questions. And obviously, please if you want to get in touch, there's the contact details. I think we'll just